All right, so this is going to be a rules overview for the newest, most updated version of Griphold Tower. It's a work in progress. I'm developing it for publishing, and this is the latest version. Enough rules have changed since my last video that I thought it was worth doing an updated rules video. Um, this is what the game looks like after setup. I'm going to start before then, though. I just wanted to give you a taste of what it looks like after setup. I'm going to go through kind of the basics of the game, and then I'll probably just play through one wave and then show you an example of a boss fight so that you can see everything that's in the game. I'll go through the different types of cards first. These are monster cards. They are double halved, so top half, bottom half, and they're also double-sided. The double-sided thing is new to the game. The original game only had them on one side, and so there's twice the monsters in the game now. Anatomy of a monster card here. Left side with the crossed swords and the shield is the monster's damage value. Over here is the monster's health or HP value. There's the monster's name, and here is their ability text. And then here is the monster type. Every monster has all of these different components to it. There are 12 monster cards in the game. The next type of card is character cards. You'll notice some of these I did a poor printing job. They're backwards, but we're going to play with one that is the right way around. Characters have 6 abilities on them. Each one of these squares is an ability, and your abilities also act as your health in Griphold Tower. There are different ability types. So here's the character's name, obviously. Different ability types. The ones with the shields, which is every character has this type of ability here, and this one over here is always different. So the ones with the shields in the corners are combat abilities, and the other type of ability is a rest ability indicated by the tent. You can tell if your character is melee or ranged based on this icon on the other side of their rest ability. Let's find a melee one to show you. There's a melee ability. That just means that ranged characters with strength attacks, and I'll explain what those are, can attack the first or second monster in the line, and the characters who are melee can only attack the front monster in the line. So let's go through ability subtypes. So there's only the 2 ability types, the one I already mentioned, which are combat abilities with the shields and rest abilities with the tent. Every character is the same in this regard. The top right ability is their rest ability. The rest of them are combat abilities. Now there's different subtypes within those types that characters can have, or at least their abilities can have. Normal or combat abilities without anything inside the shield here, those are considered normal combat abilities. If there's an S, there, I'll get a little closer. If there's an S in there, that's a slot combat ability. And if there's a B in there, that's a boss combat ability. Now, rest abilities can also be boss combat abilities as well. So there might be a B inside the tent. I think one of them has that. Yeah, here's Blue Mage has a boss rest ability. The difference between those types of abilities are normal combat abilities. When you use them during combat, if they in any way deplete the monster's health or do damage to the monster, when you defeat that monster, you then cannot slot it, and I'll talk about what that means. And that's a bit of a disadvantage. However, a slot combat ability, even if this ability depletes a monster's HP or even defeats it on its own, you can still slot that monster. So like this one would be a good example. Attack to a monster equal to current total strength. If I were to activate this ability and it would defeat a monster, I could still go ahead and slot that monster. Boss combat abilities. This is something new about this version of the game. These are abilities that help you later. They sort of either set you up with something for the boss fight, like you can, I don't know, rotate a card leading into the boss fight that will help you, or you can even diminish the boss's strength as you go. So this one says discard a strength to do its armor as damage to a boss. And note that this is also still a combat ability, so it must be activated during the combat phase. I can't do that during the rest phase or anything. I think it's going to be easiest to, instead of just going through all the mechanisms, I think it's just going to be easy for me to start playing and show you how it works and talk through it. So when you set up the game, you will choose one character. I think we're going to play as the monk. You will then go ahead and shuffle the monster deck. That means shuffling the order. It means rotating. And it also means flipping. Then depending on the difficulty that you want to play on, you'll pull either 3 or 4 strength cards from the back. We're going to play on normal difficulty, which means we'll pull 3 strength cards from the back. If we were playing on easy or novice, we would start with 4 strength cards. And if we were playing on hard, we would start with 3 strength cards, but we don't get the free heal after the end of the wave. I'll show you the tracker card here. This reminds you what round you're on. You're going to play through 5 waves, and at the end of the 5th wave, you'll face the boss. So you stick that in behind the last monster and in front of your first strength card. It's actually pretty easy to do. And then you take your boss, and so you'll choose your boss. In the base game, there's 2 bosses. Here we have Death's Bane and Azazel. And we're going to go with the easier one. I think he's easier. And he goes behind the round tracker card that you just put back there, but leave him sticking up just a little bit, because that's going to help when you're putting your character card in there. So now you put your character card right in front of that boss card and behind the round tracker card, and you just cover up his name so that you can still see all the abilities. So here, this would be me at full health. As we're going to be sometimes exhausting these abilities just to use them, and sometimes we're going to be taking damage, and that means we're going to be covering up abilities. So this would be an exhausted ability, and I'm also at 5 health now instead of 6, and same, this would be, I'd be at 4 health instead of 6. So we start at full health. We've got our strength cards. Let me talk about the phases. I made myself a cheat sheet here. 4 phases in every wave. You start with the setup phase. We just did that. Then we go into the combat phase. That's the main part of the game. And then the final damage phase and the rest phase. So maybe I'll leave that over there. The main mechanism of the game is using your strength cards. So when you rotate these for the start, these are like your starting resources. It's your strength. Each one of these is considered a strength card, and the cards over on the side here are considered slotted. So you start out with 3 slotted strength cards. This is a strength card's strength value, and this is the strength card's armor value. Armor does not come into play yet. That comes in during the final damage phase, and then it actually is relevant in the rest phase as well. The main thing you're doing in this game is trying to use these strength cards to defeat monsters. So this monster has an HP of 8. Let's just take a look at his ability here. It says instant, flip other visible monsters, so we'll be good and do that. You're always looking at 2 monsters at the same time. So it's like you're stuck in the top room of this tower. There's one way in, one way out, and these monsters are lined up to try to fit through this single door. You can see the front one, and you can kind of see the second one, but after that, it's all obscure to you. And so that's what you're trying to replicate in the game here. You have to obey these monster abilities, obviously, but you know what, for a second, let's pretend that these guys didn't have an ability. Let's pretend this was blank. What I would do here is I would try to use my strength card or multiple strength cards to defeat this 8. And I happen to have an 8 here, so that's perfect. So what I get to do is I get to discard my strength card to the back, and I'll try to show you what I'm doing there. I just slid it right in front of my hand here. So that's where he's hanging out. And this is actually called the Underworld. That's a terminology change that I added more recently to the game that will help you, hopefully help people understand what's going on. So this is the Underworld. It's where discarded strength cards go. It's where defeated monsters who are not slotted go. And then because we defeated that monster with strength, we get to slot it. So it's a new strength card. And you can see that was 100% efficient, right? We defeated an 8 with an 8. What you're going to find, and the main tension of the game here, is you can't always defeat an 8 with an 8. Sometimes you're forced to defeat an 8 with a 10. And so your strength kind of gets whittled down as you go. And that's kind of where abilities come in too. Sometimes you'll find you don't have enough strength left to defeat these guys, or you see an opportunity and you'll use your character abilities to defeat them, or at least help you get around it somehow. So let's just pretend there's no monster's ability still. Let's get this main mechanic down. We have a 10 here for the Phantom, and I'm kind of in trouble, right? I don't have a 10. So if I really needed to defeat this with strength, I would use 2 strength cards probably. And I don't want to use my 9 because I want to save that. So I'd probably use my lower 2. I'd use my 8 and my 6. So I'll go ahead and discard those back to the Underworld. And then I get to slot this 10. Okay. This is the front monster. This is the second monster. I'm a melee character, so I only have 1 range, so I can only attack this guy. If I had a ranged character, I could attack this guy. So if this was a real game, I would probably be... this is actually a little easier way to do it. I'll slot him first, and then I'll use this 9 to defeat him. And we would continue like that. This one is actually really nice because I can beat a 7 with a 7. So you get that main way. The more you can do this and the more efficiently you can do this, probably the better, especially starting out with the game. So let's talk about character abilities. Each character has 6 abilities. Like I said before, the combat ones we can use right now because we are in the combat phase. You use your rest ability during the rest phase. So let's read a couple of these. If I can get my camera to focus. Neutralize. Pull second monster to front and prevent its front ability. Elude. Let a monster pass without taking initial damage. I'll have to explain what those things mean. This is my boss ability. Discard a strength card to do its armor as damage to the boss. Flying Kick is a slot ability, which means if I defeat a monster, or if it helps me defeat a monster or reduce its HP, I can still slot it. Attack to a monster equal to current total strength. Also note that when we're talking about which ones you get to slot and not slot, this is a normal combat ability. It's not a slot ability, but it doesn't need to be because this ability only manipulates the order of the monsters in the line. It's only pulling the front monster or the second monster to front. It's not actually reducing its health points at all. So if I would use this ability, let's say I use this ability and then this guy comes in the front, and then having a hard time doing this while looking through my camera. This guy comes in the front, and say I defeat him with a strength card with that 10. I still get to slot him because this normal combat ability didn't reduce his HP at all. But let's say I had a different ability that said do 5 damage to the monster, and it was a normal combat ability. If I used it on a monster and then finished it off with a strength card, I wouldn't get to slot that monster. It would have to go directly back to the underworld, and I would be out that strength card. So the way that abilities work is you can use them up to twice in a wave, and you can activate them in one of two ways. You can discard any strength card to activate any ability or any combat ability. So let's say I wanted to do flying kick. Attack, let's get it focused here. Attack to a monster equal to current total strength. My current total strength is 15. That would certainly be enough to defeat this cursed warrior here. So let's say for some reason I wanted to do that. I could discard any strength card back to the underworld, back there, and that would activate this ability. And since it's a slot ability, I could then slot the monster. So let's say I did that and I really want to do it again. Well, I can't pay a strength card to activate it again. You can only do that once per ability per wave. I would have to wait till next wave to do that. But what I can do is you can also exhaust an ability to use it. So I could cover it up. Exhausting just means covering it up. So I can go like that. And then I could do it again. And since it's a slot ability with the S there, that means you get to slot the monster defeated with it. And so I'm still at 15 HP, or strength, sorry. And that's certainly enough to beat this 6. And so let's say I covered that ability up. Then I could slot this monster. But you notice you got to be careful with that because now I'm down to 4 health. You don't have to have used an ability by discarding a strength before you exhaust it to use it. So let's say we hadn't used this yet. I could still do that. And the first time I use it this wave, I could exhaust it. Thing is, once you exhaust it, obviously you can't use it again. It's covered up. So I couldn't exhaust it first and use it and then say, well, I want to pay a strength card to use it now. You couldn't do that. It's gone for the wave. So hopefully that makes sense. You know, that was a slot ability. You can do it on normal combat abilities. I could pull the second monster to front by exhausting it, and then it would just happen. Or I could pay a strength card and put it to the back and not have to exhaust it, and then I could use it that way. So let's pretend maybe that we did that, and I'm just going to get us to an end of wave state here. That seems reasonable. This makes sense. So let's say that we had kind of a tough wave, and we're here. We've lost 4 health. Maybe we've exhausted all these abilities ourselves just to activate them. And once that final monster in the wave is defeated or slotted, then the combat phase is over. So let's say I still had this guy here, and I don't know, let's say I defeat him with that 8. Now we're done with the combat phase and we enter the final damage phase. That is, I'll come back to that in a second. So we would do the final damage phase. I'll have to go back and explain that in a second. But during the wave, you can do what's called letting monsters pass, which means putting them down here, and then you have to deal with them again in the final damage phase. For now, let's pretend we hadn't let any monsters pass, and we enter the rest phase. And this is where your armor comes into play the second time, where so the remaining strength I have an armor value of 2 and an armor value of 1. This armor heals you, so I have a total of 3 armor. That's my kind of armor pool, and I can heal up to 3 abilities using that. So let's say I go heal that one, and that one. When you're playing on novice difficulty or normal difficulty, you also get 1 free heal after the wave. So I would be fortunate. I could heal that other one with my 1 free heal, and that would heal me fully. If let's say we had a really bad wave and we were like this, I use my 3 to heal up to here, and then I use my free heal to get me to here, I would start next wave like this with this same ability exhausted already at the start. And then let's also talk about the rest ability, which is this guy up here. The rest ability we use during the rest phase, and most characters, let me find one here, you get to use your rest ability for free. So let's read the Arbalists. Add damage taken last wave to the first used strength card next wave. So that would mean if, let's say, he ended up having taken 4 damage this wave, no matter how much he heals, he can still heal, but for free he gets to use his rest ability and add 4 to the first strength card he attacks with next wave. So that's a pretty cool ability, and it kind of rewards him for taking damage. So most rest abilities are like that. They don't say anything about a cost, and you can just do their effect for free. Some rest abilities say cost 1 or cost 2. So this one says cost 1 to rotate front or second monster at wave start. That seems pretty handy, especially if I get a poor draw and I've got a monster with like a front ability. That's pretty painful. Except it says cost 1, and that means you got to pay 1 armor. So what I would have had to do was, when I was healing, I would have had to have saved an armor. So I told you my armor pool was 3 after the wave. And let's say I was here. Let's pretend that I really want to use this, and I think that's more beneficial to me than healing all the way. So I need to pay that cost 1 to use my rest ability. So you deal with your rest ability after you heal, and so we'll heal first. I have 3 armor to heal with. I'm only going to use 2 of it because I want to save 1 to pay that cost. So I'll heal. I'll spend 2 of my armor to heal. I'll use my free 1 since I'm playing on normal. And so I'm left like this. And then I have 1 armor left to pay this cost, and I get to use that ability. So let's back up just a little bit. Let's get into a kind of a mid-wave game state here. And I need to tell you about letting monsters pass so that we can practice the final damage phase, and then I think after that I'll talk about monster abilities. So let's pretend for whatever reason I don't want to have to spend a strength card or spend an ability to take this guy on. A more common example, why don't we just start with that? Let's say I'm having a bad wave, and this is the only, I have a 3 strength card left. And this is what I'm up against. Well, I've looked through my abilities, and I don't think I have anything that can help me. And I obviously can't beat this 7 with this 3. So I have to let this guy pass. And the visualization is you're kind of letting it by you into the room. And it's actually, if a monster passes you, it's considered in the room. And so the way you let a monster pass, you can only let the front monster pass. You can't let you can't let the second monster pass. It has to be the front monster. And let's say I can't, or I don't want to deal with him. I turn him upside down. I put him all the way to the back, if you can see what I'm doing there. And so I've let him pass, and he is in the room with me, and I'll have to deal with him later. But when you let a monster pass, you have to take 2 rounds of damage from him. So if you remember, this is the monster's damage value, and this is when it comes into play. Letting him pass, he clips you on the way by, and so I have to take damage equal to his damage value. So this is how you take damage. You just exhaust an ability equal to the damage value, and I'm good to go for now. So that's called initial damage. When you let the monster pass, that's called initial damage, and then you'll deal with him later. So let's say it's the end of the wave. I don't know. Let's say it's the end of the wave and somehow I had gotten back to there. And I have, I don't know, let's say I have 2 damage on me. And this is where I'm at. Now, that would be the end of the combat phase. Now I'm entering the final damage phase, and that's when you deal with the final damage from the monsters that are in the room. So we took initial damage from him, And so we took this on the way by. Now we have to take it again in the final damage phase. So let's say for some odd reason I didn't have any strength cards left. I'm not sure how that would actually happen, but let's say I didn't have any strength cards left. I would just have to take this. And so I would discard him to the underworld, and I would have to take that final damage. And then we could go into the rest phase where we would heal and or use our rest ability. But another purpose of armor other than healing is blocking final damage. So I have one monster in the room. He's got the 1 damage. He still has to do final damage to me. So first you total up your armor. So I have 2 total armor. I'm going to devote 1 of that to block him. So I have to deal with him again since he's in the room with me. I'm going to block that with 1 of my armor, and then I'm going to use my other armor to heal. So I'll heal my 1, and then since I'm playing on normal, I get 1 free heal after the wave, and so actually that didn't go too bad. I get to heal up all the way. But you notice I used up both of my armor points here, so I don't get to use my rest ability because I don't have enough to pay that cost. So I think this will be part 1. I'm recording this on my phone, and so unfortunately, if I remember right, it has a 30-minute timer on it, and it'll cut me off here. So I'd rather cut off at a good spot there, and we'll just call this video part 1, and I will be back for part 2.